Hey everyone, I'm a Grand Archive Store champion, and today I want to go over one of my favorite decks to play, Umbra Tristan. Tristan is a mid-range deck who wants to build up preparation counters to get that instant kill. Now sometimes a Star Calling's a line, and she can get an early game combo to win. She has a lot of defensive cards, so her late game isn't too horrible either. She has some really cool abilities like stealing opponents' cards and making copies of herself. If you have enough prep counters, she could summon her sword outside of the material phase, and her clothes could wield it. She has a lot of cards with the agility ability. This lets her return cards from her memory to her hand at the end of her turn. Return some cards with fast actions to trap your opponent. If this sounds appealing, watch on. I want to start with one of the only negatives I have about this deck, and that's price. The truth is, she's just expensive to build. Unfortunately, Regalia items are short printed, so getting her special summoning sword, Shadow's Claw, is tough. Sadi is an assassin's signature ally, but she's also good at other decks, so her price is up there too. Let's go over some other cards in Tristan's basic strategy. First, level 1 Tristan can generate a prep counter or return 3 cards to your hand at the end of your turn. 99% of the time you'll be wanting the prep counter. Tristan level 2 lets you draw a card if you have 2 prep counters, or draw 2 cards if you have 4 prep counters. You really should be leveling once you save up 4 prep counters, as drawing 2 cards is incredibly game breaking. Only level up if you have less if you're absolutely desperate. When it comes to Tristan level 3, Tristan's really special. She has 2 you can pick from. Her first level 3 lets you steal opponents' cards. They'll banish 4 cards face down, which they cannot look at. You can cast these cards and ignore their element requirements. This form can also level up into her other level 3, and if you do, you get to draw 2 cards. It's important for new players to understand you don't always want to level into this form. You should only take this if your HP is healthy and if you're controlling the board. Now let's take a look at her Tristan's other level 3. This one gives you a prep counter and summons 2 ominous shadow tokens. Since these tokens have 4 hit points and ignore 3 points of damage, every time they would take damage, your opponent will generally have to deal them 7 points of damage at once to kill them. In combat at least. Already a hard feat with 1, and you get 2 of them. Keep in mind these tokens can only attack things that Tristan herself deals combat damage to. If your opponent makes one of Tristan's attacks 0, then the other tokens can't attack it. Also remember that this Tristan can't level up into the other level 3. Only her other level 3 can level up into different champions. And don't forget to draw the 2 cards when you do. Alright, so we talked about this before. Shadow's Claw helps your tokens a lot. Firstly, it can materialize outside of your material phase. If you have 4 prep counters, that means you can materialize something and then bring Shadow's Claw out later in the same turn. It's fine. Secondly, it can be used by the Shadow tokens, which is pretty rare. Thirdly, if you have 2 durability counters on it, that's at least 2. That's when the Shadow tokens aren't going to make it disappear, because its effect is on attack, you add a durability counter if it's used by a Shadow token. So if you have 1 counter, the sword will break. It won't have the opportunity to add another counter when it hits 0. So the turns, Tristan's attack will hit for 1, and then the tokens with the sword will hit for 2 each. So as long as everything's going swimmingly, you'll be hitting for 5. Now one of the first things you're going to want to materialize is actually going to be your Windwalker boots. We use prep counters to pay for powerful effects like Slice and Dice as well as Shadow Strike. 2 things to remember: Tristan has to be awake to get a prep counter at the end of your turn. Also remember, you can banish the boots when you have 5 prep counters to draw a card. The drawing effect is pretty critical because Tristan has cards that negate effects. Alright, let's talk about Assassin's Ripper a little bit more. This could turn Slice and Dice into a one-hit knockout. Its ability of using a prep counter to boost its attack up 2 points lasts until the end of turn. Meaning, as long as you have 2 durability counters on it, and then you Slice and Dice, the Slice and Dice will get +3 on its offense for both of its attacks. In other words, Slice and Dice would hit for 15. Okay, let's talk about one of the best allies in the game, Sadi. We briefly touched on her before. Her first ability isn't class bonus, so you can benefit from it right away. You can pay 2 to return Sadi to your hand and gain a prep counter. Paying 2 to get a prep counter is already good, but the fact that Sadi goes to your hand instead of the graveyard makes it fantastic. You'll mostly be using it defensively. It's a fast effect, meaning if your opponent attacks Sadi or tries to use a fast effect to kill her, you could respond by putting her in your hand. And the ability is not limited to once per turn. So as long as let's say your opponent attacks, you use her effect, and then your opponent chains to Sadi's effect by using a card to destroy her, like a card with an effect to destroy her. You could use Sadi's effect again as long as you have enough cards in hand, so you could still save your Sadi. Now, let's talk about her second class bonus ability. You get agility 3 if she can kill something. So where her two attack power is pretty average, but it's really, you can use daggers to have Tristan attack something to help Sadi out as well. But yeah, being able to return 3 things on kill on an ally that can return itself if your opponent tries to stop her, that's just fantastic. So I don't want to be talking about like basic engine cards in these videos, but Scout the Land, Fairy Whisper is really important for this deck. It lets you hit for your heavy hitter cards or your level up cards. Fairy Whispers is especially useful since it only costs 1 to activate it. Like if you draw a Shadow Strike in your opening hand, that sucks. But if you use it for Fairy Whispers and then next turn just banish your 1 Shadow Strike in memory to go into level 1 Tristan, that makes a good use of it. Stifling Trap keeps your opponents on their toes because even if you just have 1 card in your hand, its alternate effect is you can pay 2 prep counters instead of setting cards to your hand in memory. So your opponent never truly knows if you're able to pull this card off or not. What it does is it stops cards like Dungeon Guide and Dream Fairy. It could even be used on your turn just to damage an ally. So did your opponent play like Dream Fairy the turn before and you really want to get that card they banished like be playable again, you could just use the Stifling Trap on your turn just to kill the Dream Fairy. Alright, so I think we went through like most of the basic cards you're going to need to learn for Assassin Tristan here, but we'll go over some of our different builds. And most Wind Umbra Tristan decks have the same goal, but they vary slightly how they're going to get there. The first build to concentrate on is using Beseech the Winds to turbo in her most powerful level 3 form. Beseech also lets you bring out Windwalker boots early. Its strength is getting Tristan's kill cards like Slice and Dice set up earlier. The deck is weak to Eternal Magistrate, and it also isn't as good at controlling the board, so you have to be careful not to get overflooded with allies. Now, Wind Ally Tristan can run cards like Shimmer Cloak Assassin. I'll throw some other allies up here. This gives you flexibility on what allies you want to take, so your opponent isn't going to quite, just because you're playing Ally Tristan, they all play a little bit differently, so they're going to have to adjust to it. And it's not as fast as Beseech the Winds, but you get more options. It's a little bit easier to pick your opponent off over time, and maybe you're not going to get the Slice and Dice off as quickly. However, you would, it's easier to set that card up, and you're not as at risk of getting overwhelmed. Now, I want to highlight this one last card here, and that's Tristan's Negate. Sorry, any Assassin's Negate a card. Technically, any deck can play this, but Assassins make it just cost 2. Because this card's special because it's a hard targeted negate. So, unlike cards like Frostbind, your opponent can't pay to stop this card from working. Their card will, if it's an action card, it just gets negated. It's done. So in summary, Tristan wants to gain prep counters to save up for her big attacks. She wants her allies to clear opponents' allies that can block her attack or make it harder to pull off. She wants to save her preparation counters to get 2 draws off of her level 2. And if she's in a good position, she can play her alternate level 3 and threaten to go to make shadow tokens on the next turn, just overwhelming your opponent with advantage. I really hope you found this video helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. Make sure to subscribe, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.